On today's show, what kind of trends have emerged now that general manager Steve Staios has made a number of acquisitions for this Ottawa Senators group?
And did Steve Staios acquire a prospect good enough to land in the Sens top 10 prospect list?
We'll discuss next. This is Locked On Sens.
I'm Jake Sanderson.
I'm Tim Stützle, and you are listening to the Locked On Senators podcast.
You're Locked On Senators, your daily podcast on the Ottawa Senators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome! You are locked on to the Ottawa Senators, the only daily podcast covering the Sens. On the outskirts of enemy territory, I'm Ross Levitan, alongside Brandon Pillar up in the Blue Mountains. Make every moment more. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Yeah, playoffs are in the past, but we've got Olympics and a whole lot more this summer. FanDuel's hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone every day all summer long. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. You can also follow the show on social media. We're at Sens Central on Twitter. You can find us everywhere you get podcasts, including on YouTube, where we say hello and let you know that a like, comment, and subscription go a long way to helping the show grow. Today is Wednesday, July 17th, and Pilsy, I left everybody hanging yesterday with no answer to the trivia question I posed on Monday.
I mean, that's the best trivia, Ross. A rhetorical trivia question.
I even put at the top of our lineup yesterday, remember to give trivia answer. All caps, 3 exclamation marks, and I still did not come through.
Well, I think that gives the listeners a peek, Ross, into how prepped and how strictly we follow our lineup. Yesterday, we had a YouTube page, Sasquatch, say, is Pilsy just reading off a teleprompter? And I said, yeah, the whole show's scripted. So you must have missed that line in the script, Ross.
Oh my goodness. Could you imagine going through before the show and typing in every word that we would say?
Well, we don't do that. We have the writing team to do that.
Yes, we do. We've got a football team in terms of numbers of people that try to make us look presentable each and every day. We appreciate everybody for rocking with us. Obviously, it's the middle of July. It's been a long time since hockey, and there's still a long time until hockey, but we got lots planned for you. In the last couple of days, we've had some great insight. Having Dave Bell on the show, always a blast, and some more great interviews coming down the pipeline. We've had a couple reschedulings. Pilsy, this one completely on us, me in particular, not confirming the confirmation. But I want to give a shout out to Hoyt Stanley too, who will be joining us in the next couple of weeks. He was willing to do this from vacation in Tuscany. Now, he didn't say he was in Tuscany. He just said, I'm happy to do it. When should we schedule for? Said, you tell us. He goes, how about this time then? He's like, hey, maybe we can push it back just an hour, just finishing up family dinner. I click on the Instagram story, and he's in Tuscany enjoying a glass of red. I said, man, there's no rush. So you're going to hear from Hoyt Stanley later this summer. Shelly Kettles, we're chatting with her. The secret sauce of the Senators skating, like she's a skating whisperer.
And she's got her work cut out for her. So there's a lot of, hey, if these players are going to be ready for a Travis Green training camp, they better be working hard with Shelly before that.
I wonder what kind of conversations go on, because obviously the toughest part of any training camp is the skating drills and the grind. I wonder if Travis Green's kind of bending Shelly's ear a little bit and saying, hey, I'm thinking of doing this, or what do you think of that? Because obviously she's a huge resource to have in the organization, and we're looking forward to picking her brain later this summer. But Pilsy, the Senators have given us a lot to talk about, even recently with the moves on Monday, the flurry of moves. They make a pair of trades and they get the signing done. So we've covered that in depth, but what it's left us with is the beyond the skeleton, organs, there's some fat in there too. We're growing into what this team's going to look like on opening night. And it was pointed out to us on Twitter, and I mean, we knew that there were a couple guys targeted because they were right-handed. The Sens were very left shot heavy last year, but Dexter's Ghost on Twitter pointing out that every single person that Steve Stais has brought in, except for Jan Yannick and Noah Gregor, are all right shots. And then they moved out all left shots, except for Mark Kastelik. So you can almost flip Kastelik and Yannick as, you're getting a lefty instead of a righty. But beyond that, it's pretty interesting to note that it's not just for defense that it's important to have that left-right combo. This management group believes that it's important at that level as well, or at the forward position as well.
Yeah, I mean, especially Ross, when you start looking into faceoffs, right? Like that's one thing that we talked about is the Senators had a tough time finding right-hand shot centers or wingers that could take faceoffs, especially when you're able to choose what side of the ice you want to pick it on. They didn't really have the opportunity to take advantage of picking a side that would be advantageous for a right shot faceoff guy because they didn't really have any other than I'm terrible with handedness. Was Giroux the only right shot faceoff guy other than Casti?
Yes, he was. Well, for the first half of the year, right? With Pinto out.
Yeah, exactly. So that became an issue. And then you've got guys like Amadio can take faceoffs. Nordberg can take faceoffs, although I know he's a left shot you mentioned.
Who?
Isn't he?
Who are you talking about?
Gregor?
Oh, Gregor. I thought I said Nordberg.
Oh, maybe I did say Nordberg. I've got his elite prospect page up here. That's hilarious.
Who is the 10th best Sens prospect coming up later in the show?
Yeah, spoiler alert. Damn. But no, I meant to say Noah Gregor.
He's left shot.
Left shot, yeah. So,
but he can take faceoffs.
It's going to be interesting to see how the faceoffs are distributed for this team moving forward, and it's good to get some right-hand shot guys in here because even you mentioned it, like this trickles all the way down to the defense where there was just too many lefties. Now it's almost like Frost. There's almost too many righties now. They need another left, probably a veteran left shot defenseman to kind of smooth things out, but Steve Stais certainly has identified that was an issue, and he's taking care of it.
It's blatantly obvious. They're going to have a left winger this year in all likelihood with a right shot. So I'm curious to see how it works the other way. If they've kind of overcorrected here, if you're watching on YouTube, we're pulling up the depth chart right now. Anything highlighted in red means they've been acquired since Steve Stais and Michael Andlauer took over running the operation. So David Perron is a guy that's very flexible. Maybe that's the word we should be using, Pilsy. It's not that they've moved from left heavy to right heavy. They've added versatility because they've made that known with Perron and with Michael Amadio, noting that he can play all three forward positions. I talked to our friends over at Locked On Leafs, Mike DiStefano, saying that Noah Gregor, for the most part, played wing, but did start at center. They then went with Pontus Holmberg and just a different direction down the middle. So I think Gregor's more of your Parker Kelly replacement, right? Makes sense, making about the same amount of money. I think they're buddies too, actually, both from Alberta. But look, you're here. What you're getting with the Senators, one, is that versatility, but two, I like the level of competition because if you were to argue none of those three players on the fourth line will be there opening night, I could listen to that argument that there's enough guys that are close that could be pushing for those spots. And that's how training camp should be. I like the competition and the fierce, hey, every day I'm coming in and fighting. It could be my last chance to prove that I belong in the NHL on this team. So I'm excited for camp. I think they've added a nice mix and at the same time haven't touched the core really either.
Yeah, especially Ross for the fourth line. You want that competition because last year it kind of felt like it was written in pen that Casti and Kelly were going to be two of the three players on the fourth line. And then when McEwen signed that 3-year deal, it kind of seemed like, okay, that fourth line is locked and set up and no one's really going to bump anyone from those positions. So it's nice to see that it's kind of tough. Like I would say Gregor is probably the most likely candidate to get a fourth line spot. And then you've got two open positions where you can put different style of players. Like Yannick has his own style and he's got some offensive upside. Then you've got McEwen, a guy who clearly is going to add some toughness, some grit to the lineup. And
elite beer league skill though.
And even Ross, elite AHL skill. Like when he went down to Belleville for a little while, he had some sick goals. We even talked to Oscar Pettersson about that. And he was telling us like, yeah, McEwen, when he went down, he impressed big time.
Well, it just shows you just how great all these players are. But I meant that in terms of like they had those videos last year, him like coming full speed, doing the Michigan around the net, him throwing the puck into the rafters and catching it. That kind of like circus skill maybe would have been a better word than beer league skill, but he's got a lot of it. So, and he's got a ton of speed too. It just kind of feels like sometimes it doesn't all coordinate at the same time. But I mean, he's making league minimum. People have complained about the term, and I get it to an extent, but now it's just a 2-year deal, right? And he could be a guy who, it depends who you're playing. You can get him in for a quick spark. Is Xavier Bourgault going to make a push? Who knows? That's a kind of an unknown. I don't think he's going to make the opening night roster, but I think that he could come into camp and impress. And then you've got your veteran guys down there, the Gaudettes, the Crookshanks, the Bongiovannis, who, if they have a good camp, like they could make it a hard decision on the staff to send them down. So I like the way things are set up. It's going to come down to a few X factors. I'm sure we'll spend a lot of time in the summer discussing them, but I've got one I want to get to next. You're listening to Locked On Senators, your team every day.
Today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. I love sports. Ross loves sports. You all love sports. And I love sports so much, I don't ever want them to stop. But NBA and NHL playoffs are done. We've got our championships. We get fewer games here. Baseball is still in full swing. But the sports aren't sportsing quite the way I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going wherever and whenever I want. All I have to do is open up the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. Ross and I started looking at future bets in the NHL, looking at teams' points percentage or points over under. Will they make playoffs? Yes or no? Vezina trophy. We looked at Jack Adams award winner. So if you think you got the inside scoop, the inside track on some of these future bets, you got to head to FanDuel and make your bets. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Get your baseball bets and props, over-unders, winners, losers, run totals, whatever you like. You can find it on FanDuel. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball.
Today's episode is also brought to you by our great friends at Farm to Fork. Farm2forkdelivery.ca. They're serving premium meat and seafood to the Ontario, Quebec, and up to Nunavut. And guess what? Have you heard? Farm to Fork is getting a legit storefront. Yes, you can still order it online. Yes, you can still stay in your PJs and watch the tracker bring you your beautiful, high-quality, antibiotic-free, hormone-free steaks and meats and seafood, but you can also go pick it up yourself at a storefront. That is so awesome. It's going to be in between the Diamond Storage and the Corral building on Carling, 1570 Carling, and it is coming very soon. We've got all sorts of steak specials. Who doesn't love a good steak on a hot summer day? Get your thick cut grass-fed steaks only with our discount code. LOSP10 gets you 10% off your first order. You never want to be unprepared when you're stocking the freezer. And that is never the case when you use Farm to Fork. You can just pull out what you need, individual vacuum sealed bags, boom, and you've got dinner on the grill in no time. So check them out, farm2forkdelivery.ca. Taste the Farm to Fork difference. You will never go back to grocery store meats. Again, that's promo code LOSP10 for 10% off your first purchase at farm2forkdelivery.com. All right, Billsy. I think I got a little excited there and said .com. It's farm2forkdelivery.ca. Shout out Canada, shout out local, and shout out to our great sponsors here on Locked On Senators. Billsy, this tease, it's not going to excite you a whole lot, the answer, because it's pretty obvious.
Okay.
The X factor for the Ottawa Senator season is, what is Josh Norris going to bring to the table?
Yeah, that's probably it. I was gonna say, how does Linus Ullmark settle into Ottawa? Because Sens fans are kind of split. Half of them are like, he's gonna be such an improvement here, so it doesn't really matter. And then half of Sens fans are like, well, Boston's defense is so much better, so Allmark probably isn't going to be even good in Ottawa. So like, we'll see how that goes. Actually, not that many Sens fans are saying that. It's more fans of other teams trying to shoot down Sens fans that are trying to enjoy a happy moment acquiring a former Vezina winning goalie. But I think that's a fair point. Josh Norris will be the X factor here. I think a lot of people are wondering, will he ever move to the wing? Will that transition ever happen? Not sure, but his health will be a big factor here, because not only obviously the on ice performance, but then what happens with your cap is then now he's back on LTIR and you've got $8 million worth of talent that you're not able to put on the ice.
$9.5 million in real money this upcoming season for Josh Norris. And he had 16 goals last year, Pilsy, in only 50 games. And yeah, that's below his goals per game for the season. But considering he missed 32 games, he was still 6th on the team in goals.
Yeah.
Now, he had that electric debut in that big 6-1 win over Washington, where I tweeted out, yeah, the Sens are about to be a problem for the whole NHL, which was one of my all-time tweets. I'm going to have to do that again this year. The first time they get a big lead in whatever the case may be. Maybe in game 1, we'll do a live video from the home opener. If they beat the Florida Panthers in the home opener,
Stanley Cup champs.
You beat the champs, you be the champs?
Yeah.
Something like that. Hey, we'll workshop that one a bit. But man, I'm looking at what he could potentially bring if healthy, if he's been able to skate all summer. And I mean, if he can put up 30 goals next year, this just trickles down. And if Pinto takes another step, I mean, that to me, and we know the record is unbelievable when all of Stützle, Pinto, and Norris are in the same lineup. So let's see that for 60, 70. How about 82 games or more this upcoming season?
Yeah, that's probably setting the bar high, but it would be great, Ross. Even if Norris can get into the high 20s of goals, and then everyone else can kind of, like a high tide raises all boats. Like if everyone else can just kind of elevate their game or keep it at a consistent level,
yeah,
it would make such a difference.
The overall record, we've got it in our stat packs. They've actually only played 41 games altogether in their entire career. They're 25, 13, and 3. But I think the most kind of mind-blowing part of that is that in 4 years together, they've played 41 games all on the same time. Unreal. And 12 of them were when Pinto turned pro at the end of the COVID no fans year. Like, did that year even count? 2 Eastern Conference teams in the Stanley Cup final?
Yeah, Mickey Mouse playoffs.
That's what I was telling a guy in a Habs jersey at the draft. I said, is that where the Mickey Mouse years on that Stanley Cup Finals patch? Oh man, hey, it's great time to have. Oh, we do have a bit of news actually. Carter Yakimchuk's been named to the World Junior Summer Showcase among a number of defensemen. So I think that's a good sign, but it's also a sign of who the competition's going to be on the right side of Team Canada's defense. And boy, it might come down to Carter Yakimchuk or Zane Parekh. One guy makes the team, one guy doesn't.
That's scary. But I think Yakimchuk, and we talked about this, Ross, I think Yakimchuk has a good argument to get him in there, because as a third pair guy, he can provide some physicality. He can provide some offense. He can carry the puck up the ice. So I'm really hoping he makes this team. It'd be tough if a guy you passed on gets on the roster ahead of him,
and it would be tough if you don't make the team in Ottawa, because with all the media attention around the Canadian team, the Sens have a 7th overall pick. Like, it's a lot of pressure for him, but he was also one of the oldest kids in the draft. Like, he should make this team
big time.
Yeah, no, he has to make this team.
Yeah,
he has to make this.
It's crucial. Team. Yeah, like if we go to the World Juniors in Ottawa and our top prospect 7th overall isn't playing
because he didn't make the team.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Hey, Sens have a long history of elite talent on Team Canada and Team USA, especially more in the tournament too. But
and Sweden.
You think back, Thomas Chabot, the only MVP defenseman in tournament history, I might have to update that stat. I haven't checked it in like 3 years, but for
No,
a while,
don't let facts get in the way of a good stat.
we do have some facts coming up though with who should be in the top 10 prospects, and no spoilers, but the guy we just mentioned is on this list, Carter Yakimchuk. We should actually take a peek
He's on
because,
the
like,
list.
I don't think Eliason's making that World Junior team. He might make the World Juniors the next year, right? Because these guys who just get drafted, especially Eliason, who is a week away from being a 2025 draft pick, I think we're going to see him in the 2026 World Juniors.
Yeah, that's fair. Would be nice to see him in Ottawa, like you mentioned, but cracking that Sweden roster might be difficult.
Although there weren't many Swedes drafted high in this year's draft, I don't think, like, how many Swedes went before Eliasson this year?
Did Salim Wallenius go ahead of him?
I think he did. Yes, I think he
Alphon
was.
Frey.
No, Frey went after. Frey was
Did he?
Frey was like a 40, mid 40s. Yeah.
True. Because he went to the Jets. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. I wish there was a way that I could just like see the whole draft. It's really making me scroll through like a write up on each guy afterwards. So this is probably great radio.
Why don't we reference should have it?
Okay. Well, here I've got it. Draft selections by year, and they even shout out elite prospects. Please never sell yourselves to an NHL team. Wow, dude. I'm glad we looked this up. This is interesting. 0 Swedes in the first round of this year's NHL draft. 0.
Forward or defense?
0.
Wow.
Gabriel Eliasson was the second Swede draft. Third. You're right. Frey was 2 picks before. I thought it was right after.
Okay.
Because it was the Jets. So I was like, but it was the Montreal pick that they had. So that makes sense. So it was 3 picks in 5 right after none in the first 34. Lucas Pettersson went to Anaheim. Then 2 picks later after, Charlie Elick, went the next pick. Then Frey. Then that goalie, Ilya Nabokov. Then Eliasson.
Yep.
And then, there were a few more Swedes. 3 more Swedes in the second round, including Leo Sahlin Wallenius, Eliasson's partner on the national team.
Yep.
Went 53rd to the Sharks, who just had an unreal draft.
A great draft, yeah.
The San Jose Sharks just had an unreal draft. For more on that, you can check out Locked On Sharks with our guy JD. But we do have prospect talk on the other side. We've got our top 9 over the next couple of days for our Locked On Senators top 10 Sens prospects, but we need your help deciding who's number 10. So let's have that conversation next. This is Locked On Senators, your team every day.
Today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at Indeed. We're driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate, spoiler, isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching hiring platform with over 350 global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work, put your feet up, relax, let Indeed do the hard work for you. The scheduling, the screening, the messaging, so you can connect with candidates faster. And Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites. So join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of the Locked On Senators podcast will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your job more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on the Locked On Senators podcast. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
All right, Pillsy. Just want to remind everybody that they can follow Locked On Senators on social media. We're at Sens Central on Twitter, LockedOn.Senators on Instagram. Lots of great conversation coming out of the depth chart I posted. Other fan bases have found it. They're not impressed. But with the Ottawa Senators, and we've seen the lipstick makeup acquisitions before. DeBrincat didn't work. Chychrun didn't work long term. So at least it's a new direction. and we'll see how this versatility, flexibility, professionalism, and veteran presence will affect what happens on the ice. Accelerating patience is something the Senators management team has used, but
Yes,
I
sir.
think that you also have to accelerate growth of the top players in this roster. You need Tim Stützle, Brady Tkachuk, Shane Pinto, Josh Norris, Drake Batherson, the core guys. I'll even throw Ridley Gregg in there. You know what you're going to get from the Giroux of the world, so I didn't put him in that first basket. Those guys, I need like 5 to 10 more points from each guy. And then you're able to get into that conversation. It'll also help keeping the puck out of the net a little bit more this year. So those conversations and the season preview will last throughout August. Lots of great guests coming up on the show as well. But Pilsy, we do this twice a year. We don't oversaturate our top 10 Sens prospects list. This is something where you let it marinate once in the offseason, once in the middle of the season.
Yeah.
And I think that the movement has been minimal this year based on where guys were in terms of up or down one spot. Nobody really dropped heavily, except for maybe one guy who just simply didn't play, and we'll get to that tomorrow. But we need help with number 10 because they have about 5 to 8 players who I think you could make the argument deserves to have their name on this prestigious list.
Yeah, everyone's talking about can they make it onto the Locked On Senators podcast top 10 Sens prospects. For me, the answer is clear, Ross. And
Clear, like crystal clear, or like looking through a lake in goggles clear. Like how clear?
yeah, lake and goggles clear.
Okay, so there's a bit of seaweed, there's a bit of merch in the water.
Well, not seaweed, it would be lakeweed if we're talking about lake water. But and if someone walks in front of you, it's all muddied up and you're not sure, so you got to keep that clean straight pass so you can see. But for me, how many first rounders, Ross, are on our top 9 prospects? Go ahead.
2.
Tell me. 2.
2.
I think a first rounder definitely should get some consideration, especially one from only a few years ago. Xavier Bourgault, in my opinion, should be the 10th guy on our top 10 Sens prospect list. And I know right off the bat, you're saying, well, this is a guy that scored 8 goals last year, but I believe there's some offensive upside there that hasn't been tapped into yet. I believe Bakersfield didn't really set him up to succeed. I think he's going to have a successful season in Belleville, and he's only 21 years old. Like, there's a lot of runway left for this guy, in my opinion. So I think Bourgault should, at the very least, crack the top 10 and be at number 10 for our prospect list.
I appreciate the sell on that, and I think that I could be quickly impressed if he comes into either camp or the start of Belleville season and turns on the Jets, but I can't put him there in good faith with what he's produced last season. I talked about on yesterday's show that half of his points were on the power play. This is a guy who barely had double-digit points at even strength in 55 AHL games. Like, that's similar production to, like, I don't want to like throw any names out there, but a fourth line guy on last year's Belleville Sens team. Now, the guys who are in 8th and 9th, and without spoiling their names, neither of them produced that well at the AHL level this year. But I just think that they have tools where they could more likely be a top 9, I'll say, or a bottom 6 contributor, where they bring a bit of physicality to their game, where I think that that's something that Bourgault is going to have to step up in his next stage of development.
Yeah, and that's fair. But I think, Ross, when we're looking at top 10 Sens prospects, you have to have a blend of where they are and what they've done recently matched with what you think their potential can be, right? Like we're not just doing a list of how was everyone's season last year, right? Like there's more that goes into it. Like if you start looking at Bourgault, his first year in the AHL, so as a rookie, he had 34 points in 62 games. That's pretty good going from the Q to a rookie AHL season. And then look at the way he dominated in the Q. 75 points in 43 games, and then 40 points in 29 games, 71 points in 63 games. Like, the talent is there. I think it's just untapped. So for me, I'm not necessarily basing most of my argument on how his season went last year, because I think it's clear that things didn't work out there. So I think put him in a new situation, and he's going to have a chance to really blossom here.
Okay, I like that. Now let's look at other names who would be in consideration. I'm still kind of sitting on the fence, which I won't be tomorrow. By the time we have our list, I'm going to be all in on who we decide. Gabriel Eliasson is one where you talk about untapped potential, Pilsy. That's
Yep.
where you're like, he's 6'7", he can skate. Like,
Sure.
he was a second round pick. There's not a whole lot of guys who are higher picks than him, and say what you want about where the Sens took them. But I also think another guy on the other side of the spectrum where he's had a little bit longer to develop is 2022 sixth round pick Theo Wahlberg, who now has been trending in the right direction for 3 seasons. He was impressive at Dev Camp. We heard that from his teammates and guys who watched him. Pedersen brought him up. We asked Dave Bell off air about him, and he's 6'5", but put up pretty good offensive numbers in college as a freshman, 21 points in 38 games, and even in his only second season in North America. So he's kind of a dark horse that I think could have a breakout year on the blue line at Ohio State and maybe put himself into a legit top 10 spot. I'm probably a little early or high on him, but I think that he is going to be an NHL player based on his trajectory. Even his last year before coming over, when he played J20 in Sweden, he was still at a half a point per game. So to have that speed and size and be able to contribute that much production offensively, I think that he's a guy who's trending upwards in the right direction.
No, that's certainly fair, Ross. And we'll have to get our friend of the show, Stephen Halliday, to give us a scouting report on him, as both of them played at Ohio State University. So he's an interesting guy for sure. I'm glad you brought him up, because I feel like he kind of gets glossed over as far as Sens prospects go. So he's had a really nice kind of path so far.
You want to throw a couple other names out there, like Tomas Amara turning pro. He's a guy who a lot of the analytics scouting community, a lot of the public scouting community really liked that pick for the Senators in the 3rd round. To me, it's how is his game going to evolve against pro players? So this will be a curious season for me watching Hamara play.
Yeah, I'm admittedly a little down on Hamara. I feel like he kind of stalled out in his development, and being traded around I thought was going to really boost him, but I'm not sure it has. A guy that I would put ahead of him is his former teammate, Ross, Matthew Andonovski. I mean, this guy popped off last season. He doubled his points. With the Rangers in 2022, 2023, in 67 games, no goals and 16 assists. He got 7 goals last year and 32 points. So that's impressive. But the most impressive part, Ross, and I'm bearing the lead here, a plus 58, led the entire OHL in plus minus. Like, plus 58 is insane. Like, if you can have detractors about plus minus stats, it's fine. But when it's that egregious, you have to recognize that. So definitely that's a guy that I think deserves some recognition. And then how about 124 PIMs mixed in there too?
The Sens scouting staff loves that, and the management team too. Hoyt Stanley had a solid first season at Cornell in the NCAA. He was a pick I really liked. He contributed 10 points in 35 games. This isn't the top powerhouse type teams, right? They only have 6 drafted players on their entire roster. He was plus 16 as well. So he's a guy trending in the right direction. And the last one I'll bring up here, and it's the other side where he's 23 years old now, but Max Gannett was named to the AHL All-Star game last year. So what's his potential? It could be him at number 10. I think that would be a reasonable place to put him, because you talked about how 34 points was good for a forward in the AHL, Pillsy. Well, that's what Gannett had this season as a defenseman, and he had 40 last year playing the full 72 games or close to a full season down in Belleville. So he's an interesting guy because he didn't have a great playoffs. I don't know if he was banged up, but didn't contribute much, if anything, offensively, and was a -5 in 7 games. So I think for me, it's a very high toss-up. I close my eyes, and whichever one of the players we just mentioned lands in the glove, that's who the 10th overall pick is. But we'd love to hear from you in the comments. Let us know whether or not it's Xavier Bourgault, who I think probably, if we're doing like FanDuel odds type thing, I think Xavier Bourgault would be the favorite to land in that 10th spot.
Yeah, I agree, and that's probably because I'm the one that made the argument to put it
Right.
there, and I did a really good sell job there. But yeah, it's going to be fascinating to see how this prospect pool changes. Um, we didn't really mention any of the fourth round picks that the Sens made this year. I don't think they're quite at that level. Maybe flirting with the honorable mention spot there, but certainly as Steve Stais and Don Boyd kind of fully put their stamp on this team with another draft, this prospect list is going to look very different. And a lot of these guys, Ross, are on the cusp of graduating from that prospect term. So it'll be interesting to see how this looks next year.
And it'll be great to dive further into this subject the next 2 days on Locked On Senators. We'll do our honorable mentions and 10 through 6 tomorrow, and then the top 5 on Friday. Next week, more interviews on their way. We are very excited to welcome all of these guests to the show, some back and some for the very first time. So stay tuned for all that. Pilsy, any final thoughts on today's show?
Ross, I've got a final thought prepared. Just minutes ago, it came into my head, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to be prepared for final thoughts today.
Is that when I started talking about who I think the top 10 Sens prospects should be?
No, it actually is not related.
No, but you're like, oh, I made my case. I can move on to something else. Well, this idiot tells me something that's wrong.
Yeah, I did what you did when I started talking about Eric Branstrom. Just click, brain off, start thinking about something else. So final thoughts for me. Hit us with your Ring of Honor topics. We've cooked around with a couple topics we like. Every Ring of Honor season, we're gonna start it off with best moments of that previous season. So we will do that this year. I thought of another good one, most polarizing Sens players in Sens history. I think that's gonna be fun, inspired by Eric Branstrom debate. So if you guys have Ring of Honor topics you want to hear us draft and duke out and get mad at our lists, let us know.
Let us know in the comments on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. Thank you so much for liking, watching, engaging, listening to the show. For Brandon Pillar, I'm Ross Levitan. This has been another edition of the Locked On Senators podcast. Your team every day.